I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justice Burkett.
And today we're here to find out, is Mary and Max the greatest movie ever made?
Dr. Bernard Hasselhoff says a healthy body equals a healthy mind.
Ooh. Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Ooh.
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world.
I like when Max goes, ooh. It was one of the things in this movie that made me laugh. This movie is quite sad, but it is also quite funny at times.
I'm David Scandura, joined as always by my co-host and guy who is very happy and smells like a shrimp, Justice Burkett.
Yeah, I guess so. There's a lot of talk about how people smell
I was a little...
in this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I was a little surprised.
Yeah, and I was like, I wonder how someone else just completely outside of my own head, my own experience, right, would describe me smelling, right?
There are a very select handful of people in my life that I can think of. That person has a distinct smell.
They have a specific odor,
like good or bad, whatever
right.
it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even then, I don't know that I can really compare them to anything concrete.
Yeah, I think the only person where I'm like cognizant of just like their natural odor, not like soaps and perfumes and stuff that they are adding on, just like their natural smell is just like my wife, because I've been in a romantic relationship with her for like over a decade. And when you're just around somebody that much, you're just like, oh yeah, that's the smell of that person.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've never experienced that with anyone else. Being like, oh yeah, that person smells like old books and licorice and old books.
That was one of them.
That's Max's smell.
Yeah. There's a lot of things in this movie.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff in this movie.
There are a lot of stuff and things in this movie.
Sorry.
what an incisive analysis.
Sorry, your dog Nora has her tongue down my ear canal right now.
Yes,
so...
she was licking the inside of your ear.
There are a lot of gags, a lot of jokes, a lot of visual quirks in this movie.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to touch on them all.
Yeah, it's also a really simplistic plot.
Yes, the plot is pretty simple, but the thematically, I would argue it is not simple. It is pretty complex thematically, in that it sends your brain a lot of places in terms of like interhuman connection and mental illness, and how we treat disabled people in society, and how we treat each other in relationships and in friendships, and also like just sort of the nature of interpersonal connection, and how you don't need to like be with another person to get to know them and be friends with them and be present in their life, which is like, you add a whole other layer on top of that when you think about how we're all on social media and shit now. So like very simple plot, but just like lots in the movie.
There's a lot going on in this movie. We'll get into it. It was a listener request.
Yeah.
One of our few listener requests that we've had so far.
Yeah.
From our friend Isaac, who
yes.
sent us this a couple of weeks ago, and we were deep in Halloween, so we didn't have a chance to get to it.
Yeah, not really a horror-thon pick, Mary and Max. Although the horrors of,
if we had an existential dread
right.
thon, maybe
the horrors of the world and society are present in this film, but not so much.
If you'd like to request a film, shoot us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.
Yes, please.
Or hit us up on our Twitter DMs. We don't always have a chance to look at those, but when we can, we will.
Or Instagram DMs or whatever you're on.
If you know us personally.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. If you know us personally, just, I don't know, text us or something.
Yeah. Or send us a letter.
Yes.
With some sort of chocolate recipe included.
Yes. Thank you, Isaac, for recommending this movie. We may never have covered it otherwise, because this movie was not on my radar whatsoever.
I know I had heard of it. When he mentioned it, my brain clicked and I was like, oh, I remember that movie.
I hadn't heard of it at all.
But I didn't know much about it beyond that.
Yeah.
Before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
yeah.
Justice, this is the only time that we will reference this throughout the course of this episode.
Uh-huh.
It's election day, motherfucker.
Yes. If you're listening to this when it comes out, obviously, hopefully, we already know who won the election.
Yeah.
And I would just like to be the first to say, congratulations, Dr. Jill Stein. What an upset.
Oh, man. Stein came out of nowhere.
Just fucking like everyone had thought that she had zero chance, and then it was a Stein wave. Who knew?
Fellow Steinheads, we came out in force. The her indie folk group that she was in back in the 90s topped the charts on Spotify.
It's crazy.
Man. It's what a time to be alive.
Jokes aside, yes, it is literally election night right now.
Yeah.
And maybe by the time we're done recording this podcast, they'll have already called it. Probably not, though. Given how close the race is supposed to be. So, I'm sure that anxiety is weighing on both of us.
Yeah,
as it is on the nation as a whole.
So how are you doing? Not just with this but just life in general as always.
Considering that it is literally currently election night, I'm doing surprisingly well, especially compared to last week when I was like really bad. I'm doing much better. I had a pretty decent last week. I am very, very fortunate in that my employer gives Election Day as a paid holiday to all U.S. employees. So I had the day off today. So that was quite delightful. And I know that I'm very fortunate to be in that position because a lot of people don't have that luxury. And they should. Because
it's almost like it should be a national holiday or
yeah,
something.
It really should. But unfortunately, there are people in positions of power who have a vested interest in preventing that from happening because voter suppression is one of the things that allows them to stay in office. So, it should be a national holiday, but there's a lot of fuckers who don't want that.
But hey, under the new regime of God Empress Stein,
yes,
who knows what could happen.
David, how are you doing?
I am good. I am good.
Good?
Here's the thing. I've cried multiple times today.
Yeah.
And it is partially related to anxiety about the election, but it's just this kind of general feeling that I have had, over the last few years and kind of like turning 32 a couple of weeks ago. I had this feeling too, and I've sort of been wrestling with it since. It's just like, man, shit fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And as I get older, I can only hope that I become a more empathetic, caring, and loving person that tries my best to leave this world better than I found it.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of that's the best that I have, the words that I have for distilling this sort of complex emotion that I've been feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling that side of me wrestling with the bitter, cynical, angsty side of myself that I developed in my late teens and 20s.
Yeah.
And hoping that I'm no longer that person.
I get that big time. Like sometimes the reaction to societal anxieties, right? Anxieties that are not personal, but are being shared by the collective, country, world, whatever. Like a lot of the time, I feel like my reaction to those is sort of similar lately, where I'm like, I want to be the type of person who reacts to this in an empathetic and altruistic way and is like, okay, like what can I do to help the people that I love, the people that I care about, the people that I don't know but would like to help, right? But then there is also a part of me that I think is what you were expressing that's basically just like, fuck it, burn it all down. Like I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And it's hard. It's hard to balance those two things. Yeah. So I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of like, man, everything is terrible. And then I look over at one of my cats and they're like sleeping on my desk while I'm working and they're asleep. And I'm like, this is the most beautiful creature that God has ever put on this planet.
Yes.
Even though I don't believe in God.
Yes.
And that leads to, and I've also been listening to like Godspeed You Black Emperor today and stuff.
Great when you're in an existential crisis.
They hit that emotional peak when
and you look in your cat's eyes
East Hastings. And I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah. As far as media recommendations, sort of by that same token, and also like this will segue into the movie that we're talking about because this movie also is dealing with those same themes too.
It sure is. Profound loneliness is the theme of today's episode.
Yeah.
The mortifying ordeal of being known.
And that in a world filled with so much horror and ugliness and chaos, that expressing love is a necessary and rebellious act.
Yes, and a courageous one too.
I'm gonna do a little shameless self-promotion.
Yes.
I have an acoustic project called Joy Unto Us that is just me and my guitar. I released an EP earlier this week to tie in with the election called Rooftop Sniper 2024. It is up on my Bandcamp. It's joyuntous.bandcamp.com. Any money that I make off of this thing, which is currently $0, will be going to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. So I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my music, and even if you didn't, find it somewhere in your hearts and in your wallets to help the people of Palestine. Even though, as previously stated, we are living under the regime of Jill Stein, and she will no doubt fix that problem
She's gonna fix
in
all
like
that.
a week.
But if she hasn't, if you're
yeah.
listening to this in the future and somehow Dr. Jill Stein has not fixed all of our problems by now, you could go buy David's music and the money will go to a good cause, or you could just send money to a good cause.
If I don't make any money off of it, if no one actually ends up buying my music, which again currently has not happened, I will probably just make a donation myself when I'm in a financial position to do so.
That was actually going to be my media recommendation for this week, was your EP, because I listened to it and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Thank you.
I really liked the 2 original songs that you wrote. And there's a couple of covers on there too, and it's just like it's a nice little. I liked I assume it was an intentional choice, but I really liked the distortion and kind of like the feedback on the acoustic guitar on the Danzig cover towards the end.
The Misfits cover,
yeah.
It was written by Danzig, but
right.
Bullet.
I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but it gets all distorty and like folk punky at the end, and I was like, "Oh fuck yeah, this is rockin'."
It was purely just a result. Excuse you.
I really hope the microphone picked up that burp.
Sorry, Nora just burped in my face.
Yeah, that was my dog. If you heard that burp, that was my dog.
Better out than in, I always say. No, the distortion on that was purely an accident.
Yeah.
And when I heard it, I was like, I don't know, I could do another take, because I recorded this all in one day.
Yeah.
Like I was just too busy. I'd meant to do this. Record this earlier in a couple months ago or something, but I just procrastinated. So I recorded everything in one day.
Yeah.
Even though I had worked on writing and practicing these songs before. And when I heard the distortion on Bullet, I was like, I don't know. Maybe I should do another take. And I sort of sat with it, moved on to something else. Then I came back and I was like, no, I kind of like that.
It rocks. And especially it gets heavier towards the end. Just because I think you're strumming harder towards the end, and I think it really worked for the recording.
It was the recording situation was the USB mic that you bought me to record for the podcast.
Yes.
And it was literally just like, where do I stand in the room in a way that doesn't clip the mic? And on some of those earlier songs, some of those earlier recordings, it was a real trial and error to get that figured out. And on Bullet, it was like, I mean, there's no way I can play this like quiet, right?
Yeah.
And it just ended up getting a little distorted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I wrote, so there's 2 original songs. There's a cover of Bullet by the Misfits, which is about shooting JFK and then skull fucking Jackie O.
Yeah, just pure class from Glenn Danzig, as per usual.
And then there's a song called "The Sniper's Promise," which is a classic IRA battle song.
Yes, and those are good covers.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had other media recommendations as well. I'll blast through them really quick. It just in some ways feels appropriate for this Mary and Max election night episode. I would like to recommend a couple of video essayists on YouTube that I've been enjoying very much.
I was almost going to recommend a streamer that I've come across recently.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll save that for next week.
So there's a couple of video essayists who I've been watching a bunch of videos from, and also kind of just like listening to in the background without actually watching the video, because that's the beauty of a video essay, is it's sort of like a podcast, and the visuals don't matter that much because they're just explaining things to you. So I'll put it on in the background while I'm working or whatever. And I've really, really been vibing with the video essayist Biz. I think her handle on YouTube is like Up in Your Biz, but the name on it is just Biz, B-I-Z. She's got a bunch of really interesting ones where she like goes through like philosophy and like art theory and stuff, but then ties it to like hyper specific examples of stuff that she's really interested in. So she had one about like depictions of religiosity in media, and one of the examples she used was Midnight Mass, which is a great example of that, right? Classic video essayist fodder, right? And then the other one was the God's Not Dead movies. And she was sort of comparing and contrasting those two depictions of religiosity. And it like ended up being like a really informative, interesting video. But it's also kind of funny because she's also talking about the God's Not Dead movies, and those suck. And then also the other video essayist I would like to recommend is The Morbid Zoo. She is she's one of those people where I like watch. You engage with like art that someone made, or like a debate, a philosophical debate, a thinker, right? Someone who's expressing ideas, and you'll just be like, this person is operating on a level of intelligence that is so fully out of reach to me. She's like, she seems brilliant to me. But she also like makes all of her stuff very digestible and accessible to people who like don't have a formal sociology education like me. And she has a great video about the orcs in Lord of the Rings and how they represent.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and how they represent sort of like the military industrial complex and the way that the industry of war has implicated all of the members of societies who participate in it. And it rocks. So just check both of them out because I've been enjoying both of their videos a lot.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mary and Max from the Australian stop motion animator Adam Elliot.
Yes.
Recommended to us by our friend Isaac.
Yes. Again, thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, Isaac.
But also like thank you, Isaac, but also like you thought David and I were equipped to have a conversation on this film. The thing that is funny to me about this being a listener recommendation is I just feel like we're going to have to set up a huge disclaimer right up top that like we are not experts on Asperger's syndrome, nor are either of us equipped necessarily to speak about this film's representation of Asperger's syndrome in a holistic and comprehensive way.
Yeah. Right up top, I want to cross this bridge.
Yeah.
I said stop motion animation. This is not in any way stop motion animation intended for children.
Yeah.
This deals with themes of addiction.
Yep.
And mental illness.
Yep.
And disabilities and suicide.
Yep.
And just a whole host of unpleasant things.
It's heavy shit.
Dressed up, kind of using the framework and the visual aesthetic, and even kind of the narrative structure with like the narrator kind of cheerily narrating everything as like a children's stop motion animation film.
Yes.
So up top, there's a couple things that I want to just like cross off our list, and then we can get into talking about the movie.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have never cried at the same movie on this podcast, I don't think.
Correct.
So we will revisit this at the end of the episode.
Yes.
Let's do some cry count guesses.
Okay. I think you cried twice.
Okay. I think you cried twice.
Okay.
So that's
two
easy.
and two is the guess.
2 and 2 is the guess. We'll come back to that.
All right. We're going to send each other bottles of our tears. Cheers for David. Yes, on to the next item on your list.
Second thing on my list.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strange food items in this movie, so welcome back to another episode of Would We Eat This? Welcome back to Would We Eat This, the show where we ask, would we eat this?
Yes.
So lightning round.
Yes.
Would we eat this lightning round?
Yes, and just to be clear, both central characters in this film have some just very interesting favorite snacks.
Yeah.
It's not concentrated to a single character. It's sort of across the board weird food movie.
And I wrote down a few. This is not a comprehensive list.
Yes.
If there's any that jog your memory that you want to bring up, let me know.
All right.
Easy one to start off with, chocolate hot dogs.
Yes, of course I would eat a bar of chocolate in a hot dog bun,
Yes.
which is what a chocolate hot dog appears to be.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Canned spaghetti hamburgers, which looks like canned spaghetti just stuck onto a hamburger bun.
Yes, and also not too different from a sloppy Joe. It's basically a sloppy Joe, but also with spaghetti noodles in it.
I'm a little kind of back and forth on it because it's like carbs on carbs on carbs, sort of. But I'd say yeah.
I'd still eat it.
Maybe like as a slider. I think those would make really good sliders.
Yeah, just like little ones.
Yeah, like a King's Hawaiian rolls, and then canned spaghetti in them.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good.
Chocolate chip blue cheese.
Ugh. So this one's hard because blue cheese is not unpairable with sweet things, right? Like you can have some blue cheese and some like raspberry jam on toast, and like that's your golden. Yum, 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 delicious. But the chocolate and blue cheese thing is like giving me pause. Like chocolate and cheese together also is not like crazy or unheard of. But I'm going to give it like a soft yes, but I would be apprehensive about that one.
I think I'm at like a soft no.
Okay.
Because I like blue cheese, and I even like blue cheese crumbles, or not just like blue cheese dressing,
Yeah.
which is a lot more sharp and pungent than you would get in the dressing. I think it is maybe too sharp to pair with chocolate.
Yeah,
and
just
I think a milder cheese would probably work better for me.
Yeah, because like the sweet taste that blue cheese pairs more naturally with are also like a little bit more like acid and not like the rich like chocolatey.
Yeah. Chocolate ants.
So that one's a hard yes, assuming that they are what I thought they were, which is just literal ants like the bug dipped in chocolate.
Yeah.
That's a hard yes.
I think that's a hard yes. I've never had any of like the candy bugs that Arizona is known to sell in its gift shops.
I've never eaten bugs either, but as soon as the local grocery store offers crickets, I will be downing those.
Yeah. I think the ants are like small enough to go down easier.
I'm eager to try some bugs. To be honest.
Chocolate cigarettes.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
Because what they are, it's not a real cigarette, right? It's just like the stick with the chocolate covering, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. There's a lot of cigarette jokes in this movie.
I mean, if they're real cigarettes, I'm not going to eat an actual cigarette.
I was going to say, it seemed like cigarettes that had chocolate flavoring to it, and I was like, yeah, I'd smoke one of those.
I think they were candy, like fake like candy cigarettes.
Okay, but yeah, fake candy cigarettes, obviously.
Yeah.
Are there any that come to your mind?
There was at one point, Max is cooking. He's developing a new recipe, and it appears that he has like a rotisserie chicken that he's covering, I think, in cola and like Lifesavers candy is what it looked like. And that one I was a little bit like, maybe miss me with that one.
Probably
I've been
not.
on your level a lot here with your food creations, Max, but the rotisserie chicken with the cola and the Lifesavers is like maybe miss me with that.
I feel like I've heard cola used is like
in like barbecue,
in like barbecuing and stuff.
It was maybe less that and more like the thought of like
the Lifesavers like push it over the top.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if they were actually Lifesavers. They might have been like Fruit Loops or something. But still, it was like maybe not. Yeah. This has been another episode of Would We Eat This?
Okay, so Mary and Max.
Yes. So this is, first of all, I didn't do any research about this movie, like at all. Isaac recommended it and I watched it, and that is the only context I have for it. So it says at the beginning, based on a true story. I don't know to what degree that is or is not true.
I believe that this is inspired by Adam Elliott's relationship with a pen pal that he has in New York, and he continues to write to this day.
Okay.
Or at least continued writing to around the time that the film came out. And I know that he had done several films before this, but this was kind of his breakout hit.
Also, he has a new movie that like just came out. Did we do that on purpose?
No, I don't know. I didn't know that.
There's a new, I think it's called like Life of a Snail or something, and it like just came out, and it's another stop motion film. So we're timely on this, I guess. Hopefully we get a bump from that. If you're listening to this episode of our podcast and you're a new listener, welcome, because you're an Adam Elliot super fan. But yeah, so it says based on a true story. We start with Mary in Australia. This is one half of the relationship that gives the movie its title. And she, at the opening of the movie, is 8 years old, right? And we kind of get introduced to her life first. We meet Mary before we meet Max.
Yeah.
Right? And she lives it's called Mount Waverly, I think.
Something like that.
In Australia.
The
like
first
a little town.
The first lines of this film really set the tone, which the narrator delivers, which is, Mary Dinkle's eyes were the color of puddles, her birthmark the color of poo.
Yes. That will not be the last scatological reference in this film. This film it's a stop motion film, and it's very heartfelt and very sweet and very sad. It's also full of shit and piss. There's a lot of poop in this movie. Her birthmark is not poo, but it is the color of poo. And you're right, that does sort of set the tone for the movie, basically being like, meet this little girl whose life is misery, basically.
Yeah. It's and we'll talk about the animation throughout this thing. It is very, very well done.
Yes.
It is also it is reminiscent of what people think is Tim Burton stop motion, and it's actually Henry Selick stop motion.
Yeah.
It is like, but this is sort of like this is Tim Burton's wet dream in terms of how gloomy and dreary, and freaky there's tons of freaky characters in this movie.
Yes,
everyone's a little freak.
Nobody in the movie looks aesthetically pleasing. Like, everyone is grotesque, and that's good, because part of the point of the movie is that, like, we're all kind of like ugly, sad little creatures reaching out to each other, just like begging to be loved and recognized. Right. But it is interesting that the animation, the stop motion animation, fits that so well, right? It just seems like such a natural choice to have, like, okay, of course it's stop motion because everyone in this movie has to be like grotesque and dreary and and sad, right?
And this the animation itself is very, very fluid.
Yes. Yeah.
Like a lot of stop motion, even great stop motion movies that will Mad God or something.
Right.
Occasionally have sort of like a herky jerky feel to the stop motion, which is part of the charm.
Yeah.
But here everything is very fluid and very well done.
Yeah. The movement is really clean, which I like a lot.
The expressions on the characters' faces and everything changing from one to another.
Yep. I also really like the color schemes of their two worlds, where Mary is kind of in a sepia-toned world in Australia, and then in New York, when we're with Max, everything is grayscale.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. It's because it's stop motion. It's not like they like shot this in black and white or desaturated the color palette of the shot or whatever. It's like they just built it in those colors. So when he has the red pom-pom that he puts on his yarmulke, it's like so red, because it's like, no, yeah, they did just make everything black and white.
Yeah.
Physically, the materials are black and white, and then that thing is just red.
Yeah. Much like Sin City.
Yeah.
There are occasional pops of red in this movie.
Yeah.
Mostly like kisses, like when he's getting kissed by the lady at his Overeaters Anonymous
Marjorie
meeting.
Butterworth or whatever her name is.
And then like I think like the tongues are occasionally like,
yeah,
I don't know.
And Mary has a hair clip that's bright red, and Max has the little pom pom that's bright red. So they both kind of have something on them that has like a little bit of color to it.
And Mary has a very, very depressing life.
She has a really depressing life. She has a dad who works all the time, and when he's not working, taxidermies dead animals in his barn as if he is Jeffrey Dahmer. And just a severely alcoholic, neglectful mother. Mm-hmm. And that is made very plainly clear by the movie. Like, we're not beating around the bush. It's like, no, this woman is a neglectful parent. She has told her daughter that she's a mistake, and she just like drinks cooking sherry and falls asleep in front of the cricket game constantly. And it's like, that's this little girl's life, is her dad's absentee and her mother like hates her and resents her, is what it seems like.
Yeah.
It's it's a very bleak situation for a movie to drop you right into, which I think you already alluded to this, but I think it's really important to the movie that it be framed sort of like a whimsical little children's fairy tale, because that is what prevents it from ever going so dark that you're like, holy shit, like I can't handle the level of depressing that this movie is.
Yeah.
The whimsy, like if this was a child actor and this was not stop motion and we were just like shooting this with actors, it would feel so oppressively depressing that it would be like alienating. But the like animation style and then like the chipper voiceover narration is both like ironic because what is being depicted is sad and horrible, but also it's like a buffer between you and the story where it like makes it easier to digest. It goes down a little easier because it's being presented this way.
Yeah. And it does set the tone. And about 5 minutes into this intro, I was like, okay, so is someone going to fucking kill themselves in this movie? And I was right.
Yeah.
There are multiple suicides and suicide attempts. And in Max's first letter back to him when he's back to Mary, when he's someone dies in that.
Yeah.
He's like someone kills himself, and then by the end of this movie we got quite a few bodies for the angel of death, including
an imaginary friend who kills himself at one point in this movie, which is played as a joke and is kind of funny. It's sort of played as a joke. It's also sort of sad. But like when the imaginary friend just gets up from his stool in the corner and like waves bye to Max and then just yeets himself out that window, I was like, okay, that's actually kind of
one of Max's fish keep dying.
Yeah.
And one of those just hops out of his bowl.
Yes. That fish was like, I've had enough of this. I can't live like this.
One of the jokes that really works for me in this opening section is that her dad works at a factory putting the strings on tea bags.
Yes.
This is sort of like in it's like in Tim Burton's shit ass garbage awful Charlie and the Chocolate Factory remake, where Charlie's dad screws lids on the tubes of toothpaste.
Oh yeah.
It's like if you want to paint a portrait of an economically ravaged, depressing world where the main character's father is a deadbeat, depressing dad.
Yeah.
Give him an equally depressing, menial job.
Right. Like, just make him do, like, the dumbest, like, most robotic shit day in and day out. Yeah. I do like, and I like the teabag machine. It reminded me a lot of like a Wallace and Gromit machine design, which the animation style too is sort of similar to Nick Park animation. In some ways,
closer to like the Aardman style of animation. We should do Wallace and Gromit.
Yeah, I've been thinking about
if anything, I'm gonna have a lot to say about this movie. If anything, I'm glad I watched it because it makes me want to watch out Wallace and Gromit.
I've been thinking we should do, because it's feature length, we should do Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
And I don't know that I've seen that one.
I
may have.
Yeah. I really like Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
A lot of Wallace and Gromit was stuff that I like watched as a kid that I haven't seen since then.
Yeah. We could do the shorts on here too. We just probably have to do multiple in an episode.
Yeah.
And it would be a little unconventional for us because they're not like movies, quote unquote.
Yeah,
but we could
fuck you, it's our show.
Yeah, that's true. We could do Were-Rabbit though, because that one's feature length. And it's quite funny. The way that the letter writing starts is, so we're as we're getting the intro, we learn that in addition to being like a deadbeat and an alcoholic, Mary's mom is also a kleptomaniac and just steals shit. I don't know if it's because she's a kleptomaniac or it might be out of necessity because they're poor, right? But regardless, she is always stealing shit. And they go to the post office and she's stealing envelopes. And as her mom is stealing envelopes, Mary's sitting there and like just kind of looking around, doing what an 8-year-old kid does, getting curious. And they have, just at the post office, they have phone books for New York City. And so, like, she finds a name in the phone book basically at random and is like, maybe this person will be my friend, right? Because she She just needs a friend.
She's
lonely.
She's lonely. All she has is her rooster named Kevin, who...
No, she's daydreaming about a dog named Kevin.
Oh.
Her rooster's name is Ethel, which I think is
right.
hilarious.
That's right. Because the rooster is canonically a boy.
Yes, as all roosters are, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
But yes, I like that the rooster's name is Ethel. I like that the rooster's name is Ethel, and I also like Ethel in this movie. Like, I like how this rooster's character is animated and designed.
I like that Ethel, the male rooster, because roosters are all male, and I
and David
forgot that
knew
for
that.
half a second. I like that he survives the duration of the film after multiple characters have died of old age. And I'm like, this is one fucked up looking rooster.
Yeah.
And also,
I don't know how long roosters' lifespans are, but it was perplexing to me that Ethel was there at the end, because I was like, hasn't like a decade, more than a decade, decades passed at this point?
And also the old,
I don't know that they lived that long.
The old guy across the street who's a World War II vet with no legs.
Yeah.
Lives through this whole movie.
Yeah. That guy must be fucking ancient by the end.
Yeah.
He's like 120.
Yeah. One bad fart and his spine is gonna collapse.
Yeah. One of the kind of like, because this movie, some of its humor is sort of just kind of, I would describe it as quirky, offbeat Australian humor at points. But then at some points, it's just straight up black comedy, where it's like very, very dark, but also funny. One of my favorite moments of like just black comedy in this is when she's writing to Max about how her neighbor lost his legs in the war. And she's like, they got chewed off by piranhas when he was put in a cage by the Japanese as a POW in World War II. And then it shows the flashback of it. And it's like the young version of him in the cage with his legs dangling down. And a piranha chomps on one of his legs. And he like screams. And then we see the piranha with his severed leg just chomping on it. And I was like, okay, that's fucking hilarious. And like the movie knows it's hilarious, but it's also like really sad. Anyway,
yeah, there's a lot of the black comedy is sort of at least that worked for me is in this like opening half of the movie.
Yeah,
as things go on, I feel like the movie gets much more serious.
More serious. Yeah.
But I liked that a lot. I also like the fact that her mom is stealing these envelopes and apparently hiding them up her snatch.
Yeah, she just puts things like up her skirt. And you're right. And either she has a secret pocket sewn into the lining of her skirt,
or those are going up the gooch.
The biological pocket, as it were.
and so when she gets discovered by the post office, they just like fall out.
Yes, and the post office man is like, "Oh, get out of here!" Just tosses him out onto the street, and then he's like, "And don't come back." And it's like, this is the post office. Yeah. What's she gonna do if she has to mail something? You can't. Can you be banned from the post office?
Is there another post office in this town?
Right? Like, I feel like if you get banned from the post office, you're being cut off from like an essential public service. It's like being banned from the water department or whatever. Like, it's like, I don't know if you can refuse service.
I don't know,
to the post office.
If there's anything that's going to get you banned from the post office, short of
it's shoving a box of envelopes.
Yeah, short of walking in there with a high-powered automatic rifle.
Yeah.
It's probably stealing the envelopes and then sticking them in your vagina.
Yeah. So Mary has this address for this random person in New York who she picked out of a phone book in the post office, and she just writes a letter, and she's basically like, "Hey, I'm Mary. This is my deal. I'm 8.5 years old and whatnot," and kind of just lets him know some stuff about her, right? And a lot of it is basically like, I'm looking for a friend because I don't have any.
Her only other friends, other than Ethel the rooster, are her own homemade Noblets toys.
Yes,
which are the toys based on children's cartoon show in this movie that also looks just freaky and depressing.
Yeah, and one of the main noblets straight up looks like a penis, and I'm like, that must be on purpose, and I also don't know why they would do that, because this is ostensibly a children's cartoon in this universe. So I'm like, why did they design the main noblet like a dick? Like, he literally, like, the top of his head, he's wearing a little hat or something, but it looks like the head of a penis. Anyway, maybe it's just to highlight the just general dreariness and grotesquerie of this world. But
yeah, and Max is a fan of the noblets too, and I sort of thought this was going to be like
I think that bonded them more,
a bigger thing, and it does come up.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more going on in this movie than
you can't build a friendship on the noblets alone. The noblets is an entry point, I suppose.
I guess so.
But yeah, so you were talking about her friends. Her other friends are her noblet figurines, and was there other ones? I don't know.
I was gonna say I just said Ethel the rooster.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
I wanted to bring up the noblets because
yes,
that show looks like it looks like the cartoon channel, the cartoon show that would play in like an Eastern Bloc Soviet country.
Yeah.
Like, we do not have Smurfs, we have noblets.
Although, if you told me that the Noblets was a real show that existed in Australia, I would be like, oh, yeah, sure. I don't know what the fuck they do in that weird-ass little island. It's a big island, actually.
It's quite large.
Quite large. It's a big island.
Their
toilets flush the other way or whatever. I don't think that's
throw
actually
a shrimp
true.
on the Barbie.
Urban myth.
When I went there,
yeah. Oh, I always forget you've been to Australia.
I've been to Australia.
Yes.
I went in high school for like 2.5 weeks. When I went there, I don't think I could tell if their toilets flushed the other direction.
You should have checked. Should have.
I don't know. Like, I didn't have
made journals.
No, I didn't
collected some data.
I didn't have I don't know if we didn't have smartphones, but I didn't have a smartphone then.
Right.
And it wasn't like I had a ton of internet access at the hotels.
Yeah.
Either.
Could have written it down. Write down your observations.
Yeah,
of Australian
I didn't know.
toilets.
They do have the piss trough.
Yeah.
Which is the most unholy of urinals.
Yeah, that's how you know that Europeans are
sex freaks,
degenerates who are beneath Americans on the cultural ladder, is because when you go to certain bathrooms on the continent, there's that big trough that dudes just shoulder to shoulder are all pissing into, and it's like, God, what are we doing here, guys?
When Jill Stein lands our troops on the shores of Europe, the first victims will be the piss trough. They'll be yanking those bastards out of every bathroom.
Yes, installing urinals with dividers.
And then
like civilized nations have.
And then secondly, we stopped sending weapons to Israel.
Yes.
And then
but first the piss troughs.
First the piss troughs, then we stopped sending weapons to Israel, and we take those weapons and we bomb France.
They can keep their piss troughs. won't need urinals where you're going. You froggy fucks. Anyway. The French. Okay. Yeah, so Max gets Mary's letter and reacts the way that any grown man would if a 8-year-old he didn't know sent him a letter, which is he freaks the fuck out. He's like, what the hell is this? What am I supposed to do? The movie, so Max, the character of Max, he's a 44-year-old man with Asperger's syndrome. At 44 at the beginning of the movie. And the movie does a pretty good job of introducing you to him in situations where his reactions make a lot of logical sense to someone who does not have Asperger's syndrome. Like the way that certain situations are framed early before the movie drops that is a thing that he's living with, right? I was never like, his behavior doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the movie does that very effectively, and that's sort of what makes this, from the point of view of a neurotypical person such as myself, a pretty good representation of someone with a mental disability, right? Because at no point was I like, oh, his behavior is like other, right? His behavior is like separate from how I would behave. and I don't understand it, and I don't have an entry point into it. It was like the movie was framing things from his perspective well enough that I was always like, oh yeah, right? I get why he's doing that. I get where this is coming from. And then when the movie is basically like, and also he has Asperger's, it's like, oh, I feel like I understand this character despite not understanding the experience of having Asperger's. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this movie does a good job setting up the lives of both of these characters and why they are the way that they are, and how things that it establishes early in the movie lead to some of the events that happen towards the second half when Mary's older and Max is older and things have taken on a much more serious tone.
Yeah.
Where, Mary picks up alcoholism just like her mother, which is, of course, not an uncommon thing necessarily in the real world. And there is not a lot of spoken dialogue in this movie. It is a lot of noises.
Yeah.
And reactions.
And a lot of like voiceover from the narrator.
How we get an insight into these characters' lives is from the narrator, but also from these voiceover narration performances of these characters actually reading their letters. From Toni Collette and Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yes. And it's only Toni Collette when she's older. When she's young little Mary, there's another actress who's credited.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that, but I definitely knew it was Toni Collette when she got older.
But when Mary's an adult, it's Toni Collette. And the
actress playing Mary when she's younger is named Bethany Whitmore.
Who I think does a great job, by the way. Good little kid voice actor performance from Bethany Whitmore. And great voice performances, I think, from both Toni Collette and Philip Seymour Hoffman.
And Barry Humphries is the narrator.
Yes.
And he's great because he's kind of an anchor for this movie in terms of establishing tone.
And he locked into like it sort of reminds me of the narrator from Thomas the Tank Engine. But he kind of locks into that mode. Oh, what? Wait, by the way, the narrator from Thomas the Tank Engine, I'm sorry, I should put some respect on Ringo Starr's name. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Ringo Starr is the narrator for the Thomas the Tank Engine.
I watched Thomas when I was a kid, and I know George Carlin's Mr. Conductor.
Wait, he is?
George Carlin?
I did not know that.
Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, sucker, motherfucker, tits, fart, turd, and twat. George Carlin is Mr. Conductor on Thomas the Tank Engine.
Wow. Who knew Thomas the Tank Engine had such a...
What a career.
Such a gold... just a cast full of celebrities on that show, I guess.
From that man. Yeah.
But yeah, Ringo Starr is the narrator on that. Anyway.
Ringo is maybe my favorite Beatle.
Yeah.
Why
wouldn't he be?
Just because, like...
He's like... I feel like he's done the least that anyone can be mad about.
Sure, yeah. Like Paul McCartney's like really coasting on his legend status.
Yeah.
And is still like he's still playing shows and writing music and doing collaborations and also just like, being one of the most highest paid rock stars in the world. And I mean, I'm sure Ringo doesn't, Ringo's off pretty well financially too.
Oh yeah. I'm sure Ringo's doing fine.
Harrison and Lennon are dead, and Lennon's legacy has sort of been sullied by him
being a
abusive piece of shit.
By the way, we're anti John Lennon here.
Harrison, I don't know much about Harrison, but I know he has like a really extensive solo career that was really experimental.
I should say George is also not a bad favorite Beatle.
Yeah. But Ringo is just like, I'm just here having a good time.
Peace and love. Peace and love. I'm warning you with peace and love.
Ringo just shows up somewhere with his glasses on and does double peace signs and walks out.
My favorite video, the one that I just quoted, is the one where he is like trying so hard to be like polite and measured, but also firm because people are sending him way too much shit to sign. And he's like, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm warning you with peace and love. Don't send me any more shit for me to sign. It rocks. Cool guy.
That was quite a tangent.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. Yes, the voice performances in this movie are all very good.
Yes.
Is the point that we were trying to make.
Yes. Welcome back to the show. Our dearly departed Philip Seymour Hoffman, last seen on our Boogie Nights episode.
Yes. because the voiceover gives you so much insight into who these characters are and rationalizes their behavior and helps you understand them and understand the situations that they're in, even though there is not a ton of spoken dialogue that they have with other characters in the film.
Yeah.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman, I just want to highlight him in particular, is excellent in this role.
He is.
And I do not think I think he is excellent. I think it is also slightly helped by hindsight of like Philip Seymour Hoffman suffered from depression, and this is like one of the last films of his that came out.
Yeah,
before he passed away.
Yeah, he had all those like Hunger Games things after this,
yeah,
but
Hunger Games.
It is
right.
later career.
Yeah, it's sort of like every time you see Robin Williams show up in something,
right.
It's just like, oh,
yeah,
that's what hit me.
It holds different weight now, seeing him pop up in something where you haven't seen him before.
Yeah.
And I also agree. I think his voice performance is really good in this movie as well. So he kind of wrestles with what to do because he gets a letter from an 8-year-old girl in Australia who he has no context for, and then he eventually just decides to write back.
Yeah,
and this is where we start getting some insight into his life, is like through his letter to her, where we learn that he goes to Overeaters Anonymous. That's one of the first things we learn about him. And also he has a penchant for creating new recipes, such as the chocolate hot dog, which, as previously stated, is a chocolate bar inside a hot dog bun that David and I canonically would both eat.
Yes.
One of my favorite things is when we're talking about the Overeaters Anonymous and we meet Marjorie Buttersworth or whatever her name is, and he gets in the elevator, and it's as like the Philip Seymour Hoffman voiceover is basically talking about how he has a hard time understanding other people and like reading people's physical like their expressions, and so we get, as this voiceover of him explaining this is happening, we see this woman in his Overeaters Anonymous group who like keeps glancing at him, and he's like trying to interpret what she wants or what this means, and he's like really struggling with it. And then they get in the elevator together, and she's like looking at him, and the door's shut, and he's like looking all mortified.
Mm-hmm.
And then the door's open, and he's covered in like red lipstick kiss marks all over his face, and he's like trembling and like terrified. And it is like it's like letting you know more about the character, so it's like serving that function. And it's like also sad, but also it's like really funny.
That first one is really funny,
but then it's not funny later.
Later, he makes it very clear in one of his letters to Mary that he's like, these are entirely unwanted.
Yes.
And they make me uncomfortable.
Yes. He says like, she keeps kissing me and I don't want her to.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that when that happened later in the movie, it's like, it's a very powerful moment because it recontextualizes something that you saw earlier, where you're like, oh, haha, what a silly little moment. And it's like, no, little moments like that are silly to us are like ruining this guy's life, you know? And like people need to like respect his boundaries.
I think that was one of the moments later in the movie that worked. I don't know exactly when it comes, but it is, we're a few letters down at this point. They're starting to know each other really well.
Yeah.
That coming back to that I think was good because it does recontextualize that first scene.
Yeah.
You know what else was a really powerful, haunting moment in this movie?
What?
Seeing the Twin Towers. Cut to New York.
So we should say it's 1976 when this movie starts. And when we cut to
the Twin Towers are featured prominently.
Which is not an accident because this movie came out in 2009. Those towers were already gone. Right? And so it's like, I do think it's on purpose that they're sort of, because it has to be on purpose because they built all of these as models because it's like a stop motion like model skyline.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like the centering of the Twin Towers is incredibly intentional, right? And I do think it's like it is again sort of part of it, basically being like, oh, hey, here's this visual reminder of something like really traumatic for our 2009 audience who we know will be seeing this movie, because it's like it gets you in the mindset of like, oof, like this is New York City is not a thing, not a place where like good shit is always happening and everybody feels great about stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And that's also part of the point. It's like it's like Twin Towers, and then it like pans down to like a sign that says "Welcome to New York," and then someone shoots bullets into it. Like immediately you're just like, oh yeah, New York in the 70s. Max is living in hell. Right.
He does live next door to Katz's Deli.
Yeah.
Which is the second time Katz's Deli has shown up unexpectedly on this show.
Yeah.
In a movie that we didn't expect it to be, and the other one was the pre-credits or the pre-intro to Who Killed Captain Alex.
Oh yeah.
When the commandos land in New York City, they blow up Katz's Deli.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess New York in the 70s. Yeah, you're living in hell, but at least Katz's is there.
Yeah,
At
I'm
least
sure.
you can
I'm sure the prices aren't as crazy as they are nowadays.
Go get a Reuben.
$30 for a sandwich.
That's fucking ridiculous. $30.
I think like that's insane.
That's
I haven't been there.
horrendous. I've never been there either. I've been to New York. I've never been to Kansas.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So he sends this first letter back to her. She also sent him a chocolate bar with her first letter, which was very sweet. And yes, and he sends his first letter back to her, and because she is a child living in her parents' home, Mary does not get this letter. Her mom does, and her mom her mom is presented as not necessarily a good mother in this movie, right? She's sort of a neglectful and an alcoholic.
Yeah, but
however,
coming across a letter from a strange man,
from a 44-year-old man to your 8-year-old daughter, she reacts in the way that a good parent would, which is absolutely fucking not, I'm throwing this in the garbage. Yeah, it's a understandable reaction from her. It's definitely a reaction where you're like, yeah, okay. Any parent worth their salt would not allow this correspondence to continue. And the movie does a good job, I think, of showing that this friendship is very wholesome and sweet and not just harmless, but enriching for these two people. And also the scrutiny that you can apply to the unconventional nature of this friendship is not without merit.
It is strange.
It's strange.
Like a lot of friendships are. It is strange and unexpected.
Yeah.
And in one of her letters back to Max, she starts asking about where do babies come from?
Right.
And what that,
and
and
how does sex work?
And there's this whole thing that she has where I guess babies come out of the bottom of beer glasses in Australia.
Which I'm 31 years old. I still believe that might be true. I think maybe that's how Australian babies are made. They just come out of the bottom of a beer glass. Being like, oh, good day. No, yeah. But yeah.
And it makes Max uncomfortable. He doesn't know how to talk about it, partially because he hasn't had romantic relationships before.
Yeah, and also because he's clearly educated.
Yeah,
right. He reads a lot, right? And so I think part of it is he isn't comfortable talking about those things because he has no experience with them. But also as an educated man, he probably has an understanding where it's I'm not supposed to talk to little girls about that. Right? Because he's intelligent, right? He just has a hard time relating to people's feelings and whatnot, right? So I think that when he has the panic attack, when she sends him the sex letter later, right? Part of that is I don't know how I should respond to this because all of these feelings that she's putting on me are making me making my brain go haywire. Mm-hmm. But also I'm frozen up because I feel like I've been put in a position where I'm uncomfortable because there's no correct way for me to respond to this, right? Which is again, even as someone who is neurotypical, is a relatable feeling. It's a relatable feeling to be put in a position even by someone you care about where you're I don't know how I'm supposed to help you with what you're asking, and it's making me panic.
in a way, because it's something that he's still working through himself.
Yeah.
And it's it's a child asking adult about the strangeness of the adult world.
Right.
And to him, it is still just as foreign and still something he's trying to understand himself.
Right. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, the mom freaks out about the first letter and throws it away. And then
because she collects mail for the blind World War II vet across the street.
Yes.
Who had it's in his backstory that like someone in his unit killed themselves, and that was like that's our first suicide of the movie. Just check that off the box.
Yeah.
But she brings in his mail for him.
Yeah.
So she tells Max to start sending his letters to his address, and she'll get them that way.
Yes, I started laughing because the way that Mary ends up getting Max's first letter, even though her mom has thrown it away, is a scene that I found quite funny, where these Australian garbage men pull up and like start taking the garbage from Mary's house, and then the mom is like, "Oh shit! I have another bag of garbage here," and she like runs out, and she's like, "Room for one more, boys," and is like waving the garbage bag, and the garbage man is like, "Yeah, hop on the truck, eh?" and, just calling this woman a bag of trash, and then she goes to like bring them the trash bag, and the rooster takes a shit, and she slips on rooster shit and drops the bag of garbage, and like that's how Mary gets the letter, is her mom just slipped on a big old pile of rooster shit.
Yep.
And like flies into the air, and it's just like, that is to me the like Australian weirdo oddball like offbeat humor, is like shit like that in this movie, where it's just like, and now it's slapstick for no reason. You know, that scene sort of made me laugh. I thought,
yeah, I liked it. I don't know if I associate it as being like uniquely Australian. It is just one of those things where I think the beginning of this movie is much more entrenched in being a comedy and being a black comedy.
Yeah.
And kind of doing a send up of some of those things that we expect from stop motion animated films for children, or just children's films in general, or children's TV specials like Charlie Brown and shit. So they're starting to write back and forth. I don't have a ton of notes here. I watched the movie last night. But I think the question about sex is that the point where Max becomes overwhelmed with like anxiety and tries to kill himself.
Yes, it is. So that letter sends him, every time he gets a letter from her, in the early letters, he has an anxiety attack,
and he doesn't know how. He has a little stool that he stands on in the corner.
Yep.
And he has his anxiety attack, and then eventually calms down and is able to respond to her.
Yeah,
but
a thing I like a lot in this movie is when he has his anxiety attacks, the voiceover narrator says he dealt with it. He, like, you know, Mary's letter like stirred a lot of feelings in Max that made him uncomfortable, and he dealt with it the only way he knew how, right? And then it cuts to him standing on that stool sweating and clutching his face. And then later in the movie, when Mary has grown up and inherited her mother's alcoholism, or no, it's not with Mary. It's when the mother is drinking herself to death. Literally later in the movie, he does say that, like, you know, Mary's dad has died at this point, and her mother is dealing with it in the only way that she knows how, right? And it just like is her just drinking the cooking sherry. And I'm like, it's such an interesting and kind of poignant way to frame it, and just be like, oh yeah, like we have names for the ways that some of our brains handle things destructively. We have names for those things, and we put them in a book called the DSM and diagnose people with stuff, right? But also, like, it's all just different ways of dealing with, it's all just different ways of your brain dealing with stuff, right? I don't know if this is making sense, but it definitely felt like it was like, I don't know, just saying something about how, like, there's not really like an other necessarily when it comes to the horrible curse of consciousness that has been laid upon us all, right? Because you'll never be able to like reach inside somebody else's head and like fully know them. So it's like whatever ways you have to deal with the shit in your life that makes you uncomfortable, is not like better or worse than anybody else's. It's just the way you know how to deal with it.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
I think you're right.
That felt incomprehensible, so I'm glad that you agree.
No, I mean it is trying to treat it in a way that is like, I mean, not normal necessarily, but normalize it. Is like
Right.
we all have our vices and we all have our ways of coping.
Yeah.
And they stem from a variety of issues.
Yeah.
This is, if you're one of those animation to cinema motherfuckers on Twitter that's like, oh my god, I loved it in the Super Mario movie when it depicted him having an anxiety attack. Boy, do I have a movie for you. It's called Mary and Max.
That's true.
Yeah, so he tries to kill himself and he gets institutionalized.
Yep.
And he goes away for a few years.
Yep.
And the one moment in this movie that I had probably the most visceral reaction to is, I think while he's still in the facility, there's a sequence of him clipping his toenails and collecting them in little jars with years written on them.
Yeah.
Fucking lock that guy up and throw away the key.
I don't think you can say that. Considering he, I'd say he's coping in the way that he knows how, which is to collect all of his toenails. It is not a jar that I would like to have in my house. I'll say that.
And if you walked into someone else's house, I'm sure it would. The questions would be asked.
Give me pause. Yeah, but I think part of the point of this movie is like, well, you can't judge a guy by his jar of toenails.
I mean, like if he actually followed through with strangling that homeless person to death at the end of this movie,
yeah,
and the cops showed up to his apartment
and
they saw the jar of toenails, it'd be like, yeah, it fucking makes sense.
Yeah,
that's
true.
If I was that cop,
yeah.
I would be like, oh yeah, guy collecting toenails leads directly to strangling homeless people on the street.
Yeah, that's fair. That does seem like a Florida Man article that one would read. Anyway, yeah. And, his institutionalization is also, like a lot of this movie, incredibly depressing and bleak and sad. They give him electroshock therapy. It's a real bummer.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
I think this is maybe the point where I need to start showing my cards a little bit with this movie.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the second half of this movie, as we move into the more serious and genuinely depressing depressing themes of this movie, stopped working for me as well as the first half.
I 100% agree with you.
Okay.
You have shown your cards, and they are also my cards.
Yeah.
It's what kind of did it for me is Max.
I mean, the big one, which we'll talk about, is Mary trying to kill herself.
Yes,
that was the big scene. That was the big scene that just like went maybe too far for me.
Yeah,
but this is where I'm starting to see the breadcrumbs being laid.
And like I would almost say that scene maybe works better for me than what sort of precedes it in her life, which is necessary to make that moment land. But it's just like her dad dying and then her mom dying and then her husband leaving her all in quick succession.
There are so many notes. So many of my notes are just, oh, now insert character has insert depressing thing, killed themselves, died unexpectedly, left her for a man. It's just that kind of one after another.
Yes. And I think that was part of my problem too, where I was just like, okay, we're just like, we entered this like dreary and grotesque world and like saw this little spark of life enter it, right? And I was like, okay, I'm hooked. Like, you got me. The world is dreary and grotesque and depressing. And
it's also charming,
yes,
and funny,
right,
in its own way.
Yes. And then it almost feels like the movie sort of circles back and starts eating its own tail in the second act, because it's like, hey, did you forget that their world is like dreary and depressing and they need each other? And it's like, no, I knew that already. You did a really good job of establishing that with like a little bit more subtlety than you're doing it with now. So I feel like we're treading territory we've already trod, and now it just feels like I'm maybe like being beaten over the head a little bit. Is sort of how I felt at moments in the second half. And that's not to say that there's nothing I liked about the second half, because there absolutely was. But I do agree that it was weaker than the first half for me. Because I feel like the first half kind of accomplishes sort of similar beats with a little bit more subtlety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that shortly after he gets released and writes his first letter back to Mary in years, and she has wondered where he's been all this time.
Yeah.
And he goes through what's happened in that time. One of the little anecdotes from his life is the air conditioning unit falls out of his window and kills someone.
That's fucking insane.
Anytime we're doing that, I'm fucking there for it.
Also, the way that they do it is fucking hilarious, because it's a mime who gets crushed by his air conditioning unit. And the mime is like doing like the I'm pulling myself by a rope thing or whatever. And it like cut to air conditioner plummeting. And then it like cuts back to the mime and he's doing now I'm trapped in a box. And then it cuts back to the AC unit and it's still falling. It's like very, very funny. Just a visual. It's a very funny visual gag. Yeah. And then this mime just gets flattened by this AC unit.
Have you seen Fargo season 3?
No, I haven't seen season 3.
Fargo season 3 is my favorite season of the show and probably my favorite season of television of all time.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't seen the 5th season yet, and I need to rewatch the 4th. But season 3, the inciting incident is an air conditioning unit killing someone.
That's awesome.
And it is so cool.
Yeah, so this mime just gets flattened by this AC unit, which is pretty funny. And he's found not guilty or not competent at his trial, really.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, there's like a lot of like news clippings and stuff where we see the news clipping about Max's AC unit and about him getting evacuated from his apartment, and like the headlines are like using the R word to describe him, which I don't necessarily know is true or untrue of shit that would fly in a newspaper in the 1970s, right? But it does feel very pointed by the movie to basically be like, because the movie has not presented him in a way where anyone should feel comfortable using that word to describe him, right? No, first of all, nobody should feel comfortable using that word to describe anybody, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that the movie has gone out of its way to ensure that you, the viewer, don't think of him that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then to include it in the newspaper headlines, it's like your gut reaction is like, hey, like, don't talk about him that way,
Yeah.
And then it's sort of serving the purpose of basically being like reinforcing to you, the neurotypical viewer, if you're a neurotypical person watching this movie, it's like, that's how society treats people like Max, like that's how our systems are structured, is to otherize these people. So like putting the R word in the headline of the newspaper article talking about him does feel very pointed as the movie being like, yeah, because that's how the world works.
Yeah.
Like,
But my other thing with that, the use of that word in some of the headlines, is this movie is treading the line with its gallows humor so closely, and I don't necessarily think it is like doing it in a way that is particularly skillful. Everything's kind of in a soup together.
Yeah.
And it's like you might laugh at one suicide and feel repelled by another.
Yeah.
And it's mixing in the jokes and the darker stuff that you're supposed to take out of this so closely. So I'm like, seeing that up there and knowing this is a movie from 2009. We're not that far removed from shit like, I don't know, Superbad or The Hangover or any of these comedies that are throwing around homophobic jokes and ableist jokes willy-nilly. Not that this is like on the same level of those films at all.
It does.
It is like, what is the purpose? Am I supposed to take this as a joke? Am I supposed to take this as an honest, like, this is just the word that they used back then, or that they used in because people tried to use that word in the 2000s respectfully,
Right.
And that's not a huge issue that I have with this film, but I think it is indicative of a problem that I have with the second half. Is kind of like, I don't necessarily know what I'm supposed to be laughing at. And I found that to be a problem for me.
Yeah.
There are other movies where it might be like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to be laughing at, and that's kind of what makes it fun, whether it's like an edgier comedy or something like that. I don't know.
Right, but when you're dealing with like, when the central theme of your movie is like the inherent humanity of people with mental disabilities, it becomes a little bit trickier to have gray area in what's funny and not funny about the situation, right? I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it gets a little into the gray area for me.
And I agree with that. I do sort of think that's part of the offbeat Australianness of it all that maybe just doesn't land for American audiences, because I feel like Australian humor, in as much as I'm a little maybe it's just a me thing. I'm not that familiar with like Australian humor and stuff. This read to me a lot as like British humor, so I don't know if it is like Australian humor. I think is kind of like the dirty punk version of British humor in a lot of ways. I'm familiar with Australian humor mostly because I've like seen some Australian comedians do stand up, and also have listened to a bunch of Australian punk music, most of which is very comedy forward. Right? Like Australian punk bands tend to be less like overtly political than like English or American punk bands, and much more like kind of sneering, snotty, just like crass. It tends to fall more in that camp, and it's basically like there are no sacred cows in Australian humor. It's like they'll make fun of anything and anybody, and it's just like it's very like scatological, very like gross out, very like fuck you type of like in your face type humor a lot of the time in what I have absorbed of it. And to be fair, I'm not an expert on Australian comedy. It's just like based on what I have absorbed, right? That sort of seems to be present in this movie in ways where it's kind of like, like we're having like a really serious, sincere moment, but because there's no sacred cows here, then a pigeon fucking shits on Mary's head, right? And it's like, well, was that supposed to be a joke? And I feel like an Aussie would be like, yes, right? And because I'm an American and I'm used to American comedy, I'm like, okay, but like I'm sad though, like I don't know. Yeah. And if any of our listeners are Australian and I'm getting that totally wrong, please feel free to correct me. But that's just sort of the feeling I had watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for explaining. Thanks for elaborating on that for me, because I wasn't exactly sure what was so Australian about it, other than the fact that it was made in Australia.
I think it's
no shrimps are being thrown on Barbies. No kangaroos are hopping around.
I think it's mostly
not a drop bear to be seen.
I like when Max imagines Mary in a kangaroo pouch. That's fun.
And then one of the mail delivery. There's like a paper boy.
Yeah.
And he's got like a military hat on and has AC/DC written on the side. I was like,
hey,
my favorite my actual favorite Australians that are really just guys from Scotland.
Australia's biggest export. Yeah. Guys from Scotland. Oh, speaking of Scotland, I do like that Mary's fantasy when she's a young girl is to marry a guy named Earl Grey and live in a castle in Scotland. Anytime they came back to that joke, I was like, that's very funny. I like Earl Grey and all his sheep and his huge castle, and we're just playing
giant handlebar mustache.
Yes, and we're just playing Scotland the Brave on bagpipes. It's very funny. But yeah, so Mary doesn't hear from Max for a really long time because he's institutionalized. But then after he gets out, he's still not like ready to write back because her letters are kind of what made him spiral in the first place. So he's not writing back for a while. Eventually he does. And during this time, she has sort of like lost faith that he was gonna write back. But when she gets his letter, like they kind of restart the friendship a little bit.
Yeah.
And then like around here is where the time jump happens, right?
Yeah, the time jump happens somewhere around here. A few other characters have died tragically.
Yes. I think this is where the fish commits suicide.
Mrs. Ivy, who's
yes.
a character we haven't mentioned yet.
Yes. Yeah. Ivy is Max's neighbor.
Yeah.
And like a very good friend to him. And then when he's like, I don't have any friends. You're my only friend, Mary. I was like, what about Ivy? She brings you soup every Saturday.
Yeah.
And she fucking got you a new fish when you got out of your institutionalization. Like, I think Ivy's your friend, dog. But oh yeah, around here is where Max also wins the lottery. I think it's before he writes back to Mary, because in his first letter back to Mary, he's like, oh, by the way, I murdered a guy with my AC unit. I won the lottery and Ivy died. That's all that's happened.
Because he
right?
he gives some of his lottery money to Miss Ivy.
Yes. Yeah, he wins the lottery. He buys a lifetime supply of chocolate so he can make as many chocolate hot dogs as he wants. He buys every single the novels.
Novels, yeah.
Yes. I was like, we already talked about it in the episode, and I already forgot the name. But he buys the full set of novels figurines, a lifetime supply of chocolate, and then just gives the rest of the money to his sweet neighbor who makes him soup on Saturdays. And she I like her buying a jetpack. Fucking.
Is that how she dies? Is it the jetpack?
I think the jetpack may have killed her.
Okay. Yeah. I couldn't quite remember.
Yes. Yeah. But she also goes to the dentist to get new teeth. That's one of the things she does with the lottery winnings that he shares with her, which is worth noting because the dentist's name is very funny. It's Dr. Philippa Holes.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It's pretty funny. It's a nice little visual gag. I like Dr. Philippa Holes. But yeah, and then so she blows a bunch of lottery money and dies, and then leaves it to the cat sanctuary, and then the owner of the cat sanctuary buys a Ferrari, gets his wife a boob job, and takes off to Mexico with the rest of the money, which is simultaneously funny and also heartbreaking.
Yeah,
because it's the money should go to the cats.
But it's one of the jokes that worked better for me.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
It's pretty funny.
But yeah, so then he eventually writes back to Mary and is like, "That's all you missed."
Yeah. And in the 80s, we're in the 80s, and Mary's grown up. And in pretty quick succession, one right after another, her dad dies, her mom dies, and then she gets married to Diego. He's a Greek boy who lives across the street.
He's the Greek neighbor. Yep.
Voiced by Eric Bana.
Yeah.
And
it's the cast of this is so crazy because that guy has 4 lines.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you got Eric Bana to say 4 things.
I don't know. What have you seen Eric Bana in lately?
Neighbor boy's name is Damien.
Yes. I don't know why I kept thinking Diego.
I don't know either, but his name's Damien apparently. I had to look that up. I was just like, Diego? But yeah, she gets married to Eric Bana, Damien. After her parents both die. Her mom dying is kind of horrific, and it is sort of it's one of the points for me, which is indicative of our shared main problem with this movie, which it's what is the tone here? How am I supposed to feel about this? Because her mom is drinking sherry in Mary's dad's taxidermy shed, right? Mourning the death of her husband, right? And just drinking her sorrows away. And she puts the sherry bottle down and accidentally drinks from the formaldehyde bottle that's right next to it.
Yeah.
And dies. And it seems sort of like it's a gag because it's sherry bottle, formaldehyde bottle. Whoops, grab the wrong one. But then the way she dies, it's shot mostly in shadows on the walls of this sad little shed. And she's choking and sputtering so grotesquely and graphically. And I'm this is very horrible. It seems like a really horrible, unpleasant, cruel death. To be fair, not a super sympathetic character, but it's it was giving me that how am I supposed to feel about this?
Yeah.
Right? What is the movie saying? I don't understand,
And I think it is sort of ambiguous as to was this intentional? Was she just drank so much that night and decided to actually try to kill herself? And
right.
The movie kind of glosses over it. There were some reviews on Letterboxd that described the movie as triggering. And I don't want to discount those opinions. I certainly have my own sensitivities to stuff like depression and suicide and anxiety. But I don't know that the depictions of those things in this movie, they're certainly unpleasant at times, and they're certainly in the vein of gallows humor. And there are certain times when they're meant to be taken seriously. But I don't know that they're impactful enough, at least to me personally, to get to that level. I can't. I guess what I'm saying is I can't imagine someone watching this movie, watching something like Mary's suicide attempt, and having being triggered by it and having such a negative reaction to it.
Yeah, and I mean everybody's experience of depression is different, right? So maybe it is triggering for somebody, but I sort of agree with you. I sort of agree that like it almost feels too heightened.
The depictions of suicide and anxiety and addiction and the dark realities of those things, it feels kind of cheapened and trivialized in the way that they're depicted in this film to me.
Yeah. And I think part of it is sort of that they're treating those things as melodrama in a way, I think. It just feels like it's like, because it's heightened to kind of that melodramatic level.
Yeah.
It does what melodrama does, which is it alienates you from the character's feelings instead of immersing you in them, right? Because the whole thing with melodrama is like, because it's so broad and so outrageous, you are aware of it as performative instead of it reading as like authentic and immersive. And I kind of feel like that's what this movie's darkest moments feel like to me. It feels like melodrama of depression, melodrama of suicidality, right? As opposed to the reality of those things,
Yeah, and I feel like if we're going to talk about those things, and this movie certainly feels like it wants to have a frank and real discussion about mental illness and this horrible world that we live in, and if we all treated each other a little bit more kindly, this world would be a great place. And like love is I know love is all you need. Love is essential and necessary in a world like this.
Yes.
If that's the message that the movie wants me to get, I think we gotta tweak things in terms of tone here.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I want a super grim, gritty, realistic depiction of these stop motion figures killing themselves.
Nor am I saying that it needs to be all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like there's an area in this middle ground that the movie is trying to operate in that would work.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that it doesn't totally.
And I think coming after so many other jokes and dark events, and how this movie just so heavily focuses on how depressing and to these depressing the lives of these characters are, to the point of kind of becoming comical and parody. And in some ways it is like, that is the dark irony of life, is that maybe your dad dies and then your mom dies, and then you get married, and then your husband leaves you for another man.
Yes.
Like, I'm not saying that isn't necessarily true to life, but here, just some of those darker and serious moments towards the end just ring as inauthentic and hollow to me.
Yeah. I agree. I do I do like, because we've already mentioned it. So like basically as all this personal tragedy is happening to Mary, and actually before the personal tragedy happens to Mary, or during it, she's still pen pals with Max, but at some point I think before her parents die, or maybe it's after her parents die, but before her husband leaves her. She also has gone to school and learned, like she's majoring in like psychiatry or whatever.
It's
Psychology.
after her parents die, and she's going to she's starting to research Asperger's, and then eventually publishes the book.
Right. So she's like getting educated about mental disorders and disabilities. She's specializing in Asperger's. She's going to write a book. She sends a copy of the book to Max and is like, hey, I'm publishing this book. It's about you. Like, you're my case study for like my like master's thesis or whatever that I'm publishing. And he understandably gets upset by this. I think this is one of the things in the second act that's actually very well handled, is the movie making it clear to you why he's upset about this.
Yes.
Right? Because earlier in one of their exchanges, he's talked about how he sees a psychiatrist. He has a psychiatrist who he sees. And his psychiatrist has said, like, one day they'll be able to cure you to him. And he has said in a letter to Mary, I don't like when he says that. I don't need to be cured. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with me. Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is how I experience the world, and that's not something I want fixed. Right?
And I think the movie delivers that message very well. And
yes.
It's like, no, like, I agree with him.
Yes.
He's right.
And I think that's a strength of the second act here, is like the kind of key conflict in their relationship, with her being like, I made you my case study for this book, presumably without his permission. And she includes,
I think that's the implication.
Yes. And she includes in the letter basically like, this is going to help figure out how to cure you. And he gets like infuriated by that. Rightfully so. Like, it's completely justified. Right. And like, that's when he cuts off contact with her. Like, he doesn't write back, or he writes back to her once, right, to basically be like, hey, this wasn't cool, you hurt me. And also he gets mad enough that he pulls the M key off of his typewriter and also sends that to her. So then after that, Mary's life kind of starts spiraling, because she shreds all the copies of the book that she was going to publish because she feels bad. But then also, this is like when she is drinking more, and her husband leaves her. I do sort of think the way that the movie handles the husband leaving her is like kind of sweet and good. It's one of the highlights of the second half as well for me.
It's one of the brighter moments.
Yes, because I really like that it's like, it's not painted as, first of all, it's not a joke that he left her for another man, right? And also, he's not the bad guy.
No.
And she's not the bad guy. There is no bad guy. He's basically just like, hey, he also has a pen pal, right? This is his pen pal who has a sheep farm in New Zealand. And he's like, I just fell in love with my male pen pal, and we're going to go be gay sheep farmers in New Zealand. And also, I want the best for you, and I love you, and our relationship meant a lot to me, but like, this is, I gotta live my truth, right? And I was kind of like, yeah, good for Damien. Like, I'm really glad that he is like discovering himself and allowing himself to live his most authentic life.
Damien's
as
movie,
a gay sheep farmer in New Zealand.
Damien's movie is full of colors and happy music. Damien's just having a great time.
Yeah.
The music. I love the music in this movie.
Me too.
We haven't mentioned that yet.
Yeah.
But I think the score is pretty excellent, and it is like, I caught it from the jump.
And there's sort of two main themes. There's kind of the Mary theme and the Max theme, and both of them fit the vibes of the characters and their worlds very, very well.
Yeah.
I really, really like it.
Yeah,
too.
lots of strings and pianos and stuff like that. Really, really good stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with.
Kind of fitting within the framework of the trappings of a stop motion animated film for children.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like something that could be pulled out of those.
Yes. Yeah, totally. But yeah, so this, even though it was a softer blow delivered gently by Damien, it is still another blow for Mary. So this is basically where she tries to kill herself.
Yeah, she sinks into alcohol and depression, and then tries to hang herself while Que Sera Sera plays. And
yeah, she takes a fistful of Valium and puts a noose around her neck, and Que Sera Sera plays, and all of the pictures of all the people who she's loved and hurt and have hurt her are kind of dancing around her. And visually, I think this sequence is like very interesting and very well done. And also, it just maybe feels like a little too much.
Yeah.
Especially when we do the little x-ray over her tummy and we see her unborn baby.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, movie. We have now taken this a step so far where I'm sort of rolling my eyes instead of feeling deeply disturbed and upset by this in the way that you're wanting me to.
It was the moment for me where it just, frankly, the movie lost me.
Yeah.
I felt the wall finally go up between me and this movie.
Yeah, the X-ray fetus that was a poor choice, I think. Yeah.
and by the way, when she does live and have the baby, that baby's gonna be fucked up
because she took a fistful of Valium.
fucking fetal alcohol syndrome.
Yeah.
It's gonna rock that baby's world.
Yeah.
It even looks real. Like, every character in this movie looks fucked up.
Yeah.
But the baby looks like
that's an ugly baby.
Especially fucked up.
That's an ugly baby. God damn, that's an ugly ass baby.
You know, in the 10 or so years that I've known you,
yeah,
I did not know that you had any sort of connection to Stephen Lynch.
I just know the one song.
You know the one song? That was a little phase that I had. It was a Stephen Lynch phase.
Oh, I just know the one song.
If I Were Gay. Have you ever If I Were Gay?
I think so, actually.
Okay.
I think I've heard that.
I like Little Tiny Mustache, where his girlfriend is a Nazi. Actually, the best one is about is like a lullaby to his daughter about getting divorced, and then it becomes about like I'm gonna get drunk and go down to the strip club and bang whores.
All right.
What an interesting guy.
Much like the moment in this movie where they show you an X-rayed fetus, you have now lost me. Just kidding. Maybe I need to broaden my Stephen Lynch horizons.
So,
I'm sure all of his stuff completely holds up and is not problematic in any way.
Let me put it this way. Sometimes it is kind of fun to revisit those things from my youth that are like, problematic and do not hold up.
Oh yeah,
and kind of chuckle and laugh at them for a little bit, and then bury them back deep down.
Yeah, I do that with
forget about them.
Old Julian Smith videos. I was really into Julian Smith.
Oh yeah,
on YouTube in middle school, early high school, and every once in a while I'll go back and watch his shit and be like, well, that doesn't hold up. Hey, that's kind of still funny. And then I'll just be like, now we're closing that door.
Yeah, hot Kool-Aid's gonna be funny till the fucking heat death of the universe.
You don't make a pot of Kool-Aid. I did.
I have a. Did you know that I own a Daniel Tosh CD?
No, is it like a CD of him doing stand-up?
Yeah, it's a CD of him doing stand-up, and there's a DVD included, which I have not watched.
Wow.
I put that in my CD player just for a whirl. Oh boy,
real rough stuff.
I added that to my stack of stuff to sell to Bookman's next time I'm
burn.
I think it was. I was never like. I think I probably just grabbed it on a whim. I was like, I've seen some Daniel Tosh. He's kind of funny.
I just know him from Tosh.0, where even as a high schooler, I found him pretty insufferable.
Oh, well, Tosh.0, yeah, for sure. That was a crazy trip down memory lane.
Yeah, wow. Anyway, back to this suicide attempt in this movie. So the other thing that sort of had me rolling my eyes in this sequence is her life being saved at the last minute by a package showing up, just because the timing feels too convenient, and it's again too much melodrama maybe. But it is a package from Max, and basically he says, like, I accept your apology, and as evidence of that, here's all of my Nobbles figurines. So, like, they're repairing their relationship at the most crucial moment, and it's like a little too melodramatic, but, you know.
And she's finally saved up money to go see him.
Yes. Before that, they do write back and forth a little bit again.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
There's just like a brief thing where I think we get like a little bit more letter from him. And this is a moment that did work for me, where I was like, okay, the moment preceding this was too far. We went too far over the line. But the movie sort of got me back with Philip Seymour Hoffman doing some of this letter, where he says, like, you're imperfect and I'm imperfect.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to like reckon with that in order to forgive you and like realize that like not everybody can live up to my standards. Because one thing that they established
that's the pull quote to get the tears flown at the end.
Yeah. One of the things with Max's character that they establish really well is he's like a stickler about rules. Like he wants things to work the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like...
That's why he tries to strangle the homeless person, because he doesn't like littering.
Which is also a fucking insane moment in this movie.
That's like the 1-2 punch of like Max trying to strangle this homeless person and Mary killing herself to try to kill herself to que sera sera.
Yes.
I was like...
That's where we have gone to...
Okay, what are we doing here?
Right. Yes. Those are the two moments where we're like, all right, let's pull it back. Movie, you had something and you're getting away from me. Like... because him trying to strangle that homeless person, it's like, it's not that you don't understand his character motivation, it's that it's so violent that it becomes hard to erase that from the rest of the context of his character.
This is not the second life. This is not the first life he has attempted to take in this movie.
Yeah,
he did obliterate that fucking mime.
Yeah, although that was an accident, to be fair. The mime was an accident. But yeah, no, it's just, it is a little bit like, holy shit, like, how do I reconcile this man assaulting an unhoused person with the intent to kill them over dropping a cigarette butt, right? With like the empathy that the movie has like garnered towards him. And I feel like they don't totally blow it, but at the same time it is a moment where I'm like, maybe lose that, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so but the you're imperfect, I'm imperfect thing, I think is supposed to sort of be him acknowledging like, I don't need to hold human beings to the standards, to these impossible standards, right? I can acknowledge the sort of like brokenness in you and like take that as part of the reason why you are my friend and why I do love you, right? And not something that I need you to overcome, right? But just like, you just come to me with all that and we'll like, you know, sit in it together, sort of. And I like that bit where he's kind of expressing that in his letter to her. And then she goes to see him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's died before she's shown up with her crazy little freak child.
Yeah.
Hanging off her backpack.
Goblin. Everyone in this movie is a hideous little goblin. It's not just the baby. Everybody looks like shit in this movie.
Yeah. He's died and he's there's I did like the moment where she sees his little jar of Mary's tears.
Yes.
Because he said that he has trouble crying. He has trouble expressing emotion.
He can't make himself cry. Like even when one of his goldfish dies and he wants to, right? He can't make himself, and it frustrates him. And she went. This is back when she's a little girl. Mm-hmm. She sends him a bottle of her own tears, and that is a very sweet moment. And it's a very sweet moment when it comes back here where she sees the bottle. And thankfully it's that bottle and not the toenails.
Yeah.
Otherwise she'd be like, "This was a mistake. I gotta go."
and he's sitting on the couch looking up, and she sees that all of her letters are on the ceiling, and
laminated,
and he's smiling and looking at those.
Yeah.
And then she sits on the couch next to him, and I'm like, he died the day before or that morning of. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If you want to, if I were walking into that room and feeling sad and nostalgic and bittersweet about this lifelong friend that I've had, and I've discovered him dead in his apartment. I don't think all the sweet orchestral music in the world could make me sit on the couch next to the dead guy.
Yeah, you might not be sitting next to him and holding his hand this is,
I might be calling the police.
This is simply a biological fact that I'm about to share. It's nothing, no judgment on Max specifically or any of us specifically. His pants are full of shit because you vacate your bowels when you die. He has pooped. Yeah. He has pooped and pissed himself.
Minutes. Yes. Within minutes.
Yes. So just don't go sitting on that couch because that man's drawers are full of dookie. Absolutely.
I mentioned this on my letter.
Also, like, maybe call someone to collect the dead man.
Yeah, like, Authorities need to be notified. And then you can have your little nostalgic trip down memory lane.
Which, to be fair, I understand that the movie is like highly stylistic.
Sure.
This is not
a criticism.
A moment that it was meant to be taken literally. However, it did sort of remind me of when Robert Duvall dies in The Judge.
Yeah.
And Robert Downey Jr. just takes his hat off and stares at him. And it's like, call someone. Now. Call someone. Anyway. Yeah.
Check the pulse.
It is a very poignant and sad moment in this movie. It is also not necessarily a realistic moment, which it doesn't need to be. Yeah.
I like all the shots of Max's butt crack. Hanging out.
His butt crack is out a lot in this movie.
That's one of my final thoughts on the film.
Yeah. One of my final thoughts on the film, a thing that we did not talk about at all, is so Max's psychiatrist, who we mentioned, at one point is encouraging him to lose weight and exercise.
Oh, is this old man nipples?
Because he's like, the old man nipples is the grandpa thing. That was earlier.
Okay, yeah.
But yes, they at one point do say the narrator is like talking about Mary's grandpa's cold plunges. And she's like, he would always say, the narrator's like, he would always say it made his nipples erect.
Have you ever done a cold plunge?
No.
I did them a lot at Boy Scout camp.
Oh, yeah.
They're kind of fun. They're kind of fun.
I've never done them.
It was a big, like, if you woke up early in the morning and went to the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Every day that week, you got a little badge thingy at the end for doing the polar. I think it's called the polar plunge.
Yeah. I've gone swimming in cold water, but never like intentionally done like a cold plunge. But no, the thing I was going to talk about is the psychiatrist is like encouraging Max to exercise and lose weight. And he's like, because if your body is healthy, your mind will also be healthy. And the psychiatrist does a one-armed handstand on his desk, and Max is just looking at him and he goes, ooh. That is probably my favorite moment of this movie, is just that psychiatrist who's like this silly little man with this huge bushy mustache, just one-armed handstanding, and Max being like, that's really impressive. Look at that. I did enjoy that.
That is Mary and Max.
Mary and Max.
Justice, we should revisit our cry counts. So, how many times did you cry? And is this the greatest movie ever made?
Okay, so the answer to my cry count is 1.
Okay.
Which is fewer than I thought it was going to be after I watched the first half of this movie. After watching the first half of this movie, I was like, this thing's going to get me so fucking good. And then, like we've talked about, it went a little too far with some of the emotional beats. It maybe lost my investment a bit. However, Philip Seymour Hoffman saying, you're imperfect, I'm imperfect, got me crying.
Yeah.
So I cried anyway.
I think that's what it was designed to do.
Yep. And it worked, and I cried.
Okay.
So I cried one time during this movie. But it was a pretty good cry. It was a pretty healthy cry, not just a single tear. I had some sobs.
Cool.
Yeah. Is it the greatest movie ever made? I do think we've already sort of fully explored kind of the central flaw that we both picked up on with this movie, so I don't want to dwell on it. But I would like to highlight some of the positives about this movie that I feel like we maybe have undersung a little bit. I think it is beautiful. I think this movie is very well made. I think it's very well crafted. We talked about the animation is very smooth and fluid. The design is really good. I like all of the ugly little freak people in this world, right? I like the buildings, the locations. They all seem very like rich and textured and fully realized. I enjoy all of that stuff. I think the performances are good. I think, like we've already mentioned, the music is very good, very beautiful, and again, really like fleshes out this world in a way that I think it needs. And I do think, even though the tone is sometimes part of a problem that I have with this movie, I also do kind of like the comedy in this movie. Like, I was laughing a decent amount. A lot of the visual gags, like Dr. Philippa Holes, like shit like that was really working for me, and I was like vibing with it a lot. So despite sort of the fatal tonal flaw that kept me from getting really fully invested in this movie in the second half, I did enjoy it, and I think it is a movie that I would recommend people watch. I don't think it's one where I'd be like, nah, skip it, like it's not worth your time. I would say it's absolutely worth your time. I think it's a good movie, and I, again, thank you to Isaac for recommending it, because I'm happy I saw it. That being said, I'm going to give this one a no, but it's not a malicious or vitriolic no.
Okay.
Just a movie I enjoyed that I don't think is the greatest movie ever made.
Okay.
David, is Mary and Max the greatest movie ever made?
And
Oh, and how many times did you cry? Sorry.
Sorry, that was so shitty of me to do.
No.
I was just like, and
it was
something else you want to say?
It was shitty of me.
Fucking prick.
It was shitty of me to forget to ask because classic Justice Burkett behavior. I gave my answer to a question and forgot that anybody else had an opinion.
Yeah. The guess was 2. The answer is a big fat goose egg.
0. Yeah.
Zippo.
Yeah. Wow. So we still have not cried at the same movie.
No.
Wait, we both cried watching About Time, didn't we?
No. Oh shit. I almost did.
Okay.
Nick Cave almost got me, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Nick Cave needle drop.
I have to revisit our episode.
But I think that was maybe before we had established the cry count as a thing.
I think it was.
I think with official cry counts, we haven't cried at the
also,
same
you know
movie.
what's crazy? That is over 50 episodes ago.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I did not cry at this movie. Since this is going to sort of tie back to some of the stuff I said at the beginning of this episode of like how I've been feeling lately. Since the pandemic, kind of shocked all of our senses, and at least for me, like fundamentally changed my mental health in a way that I'm still coping with, and I don't know that I cannot see a future in which I do not, still have these issues and react to things in the way that I do now, post pandemic.
Yep.
Since then, I have occasionally sought out art that is unafraid to confront the inherent and man-made evils of our world and the darkness and the depression that is both, just inherent to the nature of life, and the cruel and vile and evil ways that we treat each other.
Yeah.
And while simultaneously saying, maybe if we just treated each other better and walked across each other's hearts more gently, the world would be a better place, and that love is truly the thing holding this world together and holding each other together, and it's all we have.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that I could rattle off that make me feel that way, that touch on that theme. So I don't want to sound like I'm an emotionless robot and that this movie did nothing for me and that I didn't cry to it when so many people on Letterboxd have cried to this thing and hold it up as a pinnacle of the power of animation. Because there's a couple other things that I watched recently in the realm of animation that were intended for children. Coraline, which is it's the first time I've watched it since it came out in theaters, I think. I revisited Over the Garden Wall as well, both because of Halloween, and I just had them on my shelf, and I was like, I'll pop this in. Nice change of pace from all the blood and guts, And those are animated films for children that convey that message in such a beautiful, elegant, emotionally potent way.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie that is ostensibly made for adults feels like it treats its emotional themes and its mature themes with such a surface level, hollow, inauthentic, kind of depth to them. It feels like it is a movie with the depth and width of a kiddie pool.
Mm.
And what started off as charm and curiosity and sort of laughing at the black humor and recognizing some of the emotional themes that were going to come up later, soon kind of developed into a perplexing reaction, and then that developed into a cold, distant apathy.
Mm.
I did not like this movie.
Mm.
I don't want to sit here and say I didn't like anything about this movie.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, I think the animation is very well done. I think it is very well, the artistic direction on this thing and all the freaky characters.
And even some of the thematic stuff you agreed was good. For example,
Yeah.
the way that it treats sort of Max's perspective on his own disability.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it's not like nothing.
It's not like nothing worked
Yeah.
for me. I enjoy some of the humor, and I feel like the voice performances are really well done. And there are spots in this movie that I think do ring as, emotionally resonant with me. But those are vastly outweighed by the amount of times where I felt like this movie just came across as extremely shallow and pandering and just off-putting in a way that I did not enjoy, that I did not find emotionally resonant or meaningful. And of those things that those artworks that I can think of that make me think of how terrible this world is and how we all just need to like love each other and get through it together, that I've interacted heavily with since the pandemic, like Coraline and Over the Garden Wall, and music like Godspeed You Black Emperor, and Last at First Men, and Bo Burnham's Inside. This does that the worst. I think that message is far more, just conveyed much better in those movies. So I did not like this movie, but I can recognize a lot of things that it does well, but I just feel like those are completely outweighed by just the slog that this second half became for me. I will say that I am in the minority opinion here.
Yeah.
And I do recommend this movie. In fact, I did recommend this movie to someone after watching it. So I would say if for some reason you haven't seen it and have gotten to the end of this episode, give it a watch and, see for yourself if you like it or not, because I still think it is a unique and creative and charming film in many ways, but I also felt very emotionally distant from the characters and the events that were happening on screen.
Yeah. It's interesting that you and I sort of had the same central...
So it's not the greatest movie ever made, I haven't said that in my verdict
already. I figured
already.
that was going to be the thing. Sorry, I got that when you said you didn't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you and I kind of had the same central issue with this movie, but it still worked better for me than it did for you.
Yeah.
Which I guess just means I have lower standards. Or you have higher ones, or
I don't know. I mean,
it's hard subjective.
I don't know.
It's
Fucking Coraline made me cry.
Yeah.
Over the Garden Wall made me cry.
Never seen Coraline.
The joke in Over the Garden Wall where like, oh no, we got to get the leaves out. I'm not going to spoil Over the Garden Wall. Everyone should watch it. It's a masterpiece.
It's great. Yeah.
Of art. They're trying to get the leaves out of him, and it's like, oh no, he's starting to grow leaves, and he's like, no, I just started eating leaves. That made me cry, and that's a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, what are we talking about next week?
So,
yeah.
What are we talking about next week?
I don't.
That is a great question.
What are we talking about next? We're doing this new thing where we're surprising each other with the movies.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's sort of fun, but it also kind of makes me nervous.
I think we're gonna plan out the rest after this. So we have 4 potential movies to talk about next week that I have picked from my watch list that I have not seen.
I'm only watching one of those, Doug. I'm not going to watch 4 movies.
What we're doing is I have it pulled up into a little one of those like random spinners.
Yeah.
So we're gonna let
the fates decide.
The fates decide. The fates of the internet.
All right.
So I'm gonna give you our four options.
Yeah. Sidebar, you said fates of the internet, a thing that I definitely picked up on from this movie, but didn't talk about literally at all, is that I do also think it's sort of an interesting metaphor for forming relationships with like-minded people who are not geographically close to you on the internet.
Yes, and I've had those.
Yeah, I kind of think Mary and Max, it's sort of like a representation of what kind of like an internet friendship bonded over like a niche interest is like. Yeah. Anyway, back to the wheel.
Anyway. So, I got 4 movies picked from my watch list that I haven't seen that I don't think you've seen.
Yeah.
They're all very different.
Mm-hmm.
Our first potential film is an Icelandic drama, Icelandic family drama
called
Metalhead.
All right.
Our second potential film is a Hong Kong action film called Eastern Condors.
Hell yeah.
Our third film is what I believe is a low-budget psychological thriller.
Ooh. Now you're speaking my language.
Called Combat Shock.
Huh. All right.
I don't know much about it.
Okay.
And our fourth potential film is a Paul Newman comedy from the 70s about a bunch of hockey players called Slapshot.
Yeah, I haven't seen a single one of these movies. I've heard of Slapshot. Slapshot's the only one I've heard of.
Yeah. These have kind of been on my radar at various points in my life.
All right.
And depending on which one we pick, the other three, maybe we'll talk about in the future. Maybe we won't. Fuck you. It's our show.
So if you were waiting for the Slapshot episode and that doesn't get picked, fuck off.
So I am going to spin the spinner on a count of 3,
All right.
2, 1, spin.
This is giving me more anxiety than the election.
Jill Stein won. It's okay.
It's true. It's true. Whew.
Oh,
good thing Jill
my
Stein won.
Goodness.
What?
We are watching the
Metalhead.
Icelandic drama Metalhead.
All right. I don't know what this is, but we will be watching it.
I'll put it this way: the poster for this film is a girl standing in the bleak, depressing landscape of Iceland.
Yes.
With corpse paint and her leather jacket on.
Rad. Sick.
So join us next week for Metalhead. In the meantime, tweet about the show, tell your friends about the show, spread the word. We had a review. Someone wrote a review on our Apple Podcast page.
Yes.
I believe they are possibly a listener, or I mean, obviously they're a listener. Believe they may be a past guest, and they wrote it under a pseudonym, and I don't want to put them on blast since they wrote it under a pseudonym.
Right.
But thanks.
But thank you for your review, whoever you are, and also if you are a past guest of this show, thank you extra.
So please leave us a review as well, because it helps boost our engagement and helps us grow the show.
Yes. Oh, you want to know what's fucking bananas? On Halloween, like on the day of Halloween, we had a huge spike in our listenership of one of our episodes. It was like one episode got way more listens.
Was it Trick or Treat?
Than any other episode that week. It was not Trick or Treat. It was Twin Peaks Fire Walk with
Christ.
Me with Val. Our Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me episode got like 500% more listens than any other episode that week.
Are a bunch of you fucking nerds watching Fire Walk with Me on Halloween?
It was very silly.
Jesus Christ.
But all that to say, maybe
are you one of those cunts that's like, what's your favorite horror movie? And you go, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Fuck you, man.
But also, we don't want to.
Thanks for listening.
We don't want to alienate them because I do think getting a review and having some more people rate the show might be boosting us into like Spotify discovery page things. And it might have been pushing that episode to people because it's on Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
So all that to say, like, literally leave a review. It helps so much, please.
Yeah, please. Yeah. That's the show.
Yep.
Hey. Real talk. I don't know what the world looks like on Friday when this episode releases, but no matter who's sitting in that office, just be there for each other. And love each other and do something to help someone.
Yep. I second that. Even though I'm sure Dr. Jill Stein has all of our backs.
Why did I even say it? Jill.
But I agree.
Thanks, Jill.
But I agree.
Thanks for being there for us.
Yep.
And until then, we'll see you next week with Metalhead. And as always,
later dipshits. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.